Okay, so to wrap up our section on slope, we are just kind of wanted to give you a summary here of the types of slope that we could have. So in the last couple of videos, we've talked about slope, and we've done these mental pictures. And if you go back and look, every one of those that had a positive slope, if you look at it from left to right, the line went up from left to right, like in this first example. If this line had a negative slope, as you look at it from left to right, the line went down. You see that here in the second example. And those are two that most people understand without a lot of issues, because if it's positive, it goes up. If it's negative, it goes down. Where people get confused, oftentimes, are with each of these: the no slope or undefined slope, and the zero slope. Okay, so let me give you a couple of illustrations that maybe will help. So let me start by, if we were in the classroom, I would ask you, how many of you have been snow skiing? And usually there's maybe one or two people that have. Most people have not been snow skiing, so maybe this example doesn't help you a whole lot, but you can probably picture this. So for those that have been snow skiing, I always ask the question, what would happen if you were going to go snow skiing on this? And I always have people kind of look at me like, you're going to die? And that's exactly right. You are going to die if you were to try to snow ski on that. Because if you were snow skiing, I'll draw a little stick person here. If you're snow skiing and you go to ski off of this, you just jumped off a cliff. You're going to die. You're on, you crash and burn, right? So the reason that you would die there is because there is no slope. There's nothing to ski on. You just jumped off a cliff. And so if you've ever been snow skiing, you know that there has to be some type of slope. Now, it may be a really steep slope, but there is at least a slope that you can stand on. If you try to jump off of this, and I say jump because that's what you're doing, you've just jumped off a cliff and you're just flying because there is no slope. However, if you were going to try to ski on this bottom one, how fast are you going to go? Well, the answer is 0 miles an hour. Now, you can still stand there. You're still alive. There's just not a slope. There's just 0 slope, so you're going 0 miles an hour. That slope is not positive or negative, pushing you one way or the other. You can imagine that if you're skiing on this or on this, well, then you're going to go downhill whichever direction. But if you're standing on this one that has a 0 slope, you're just standing there. You're going 0 miles an hour. And so maybe you can kind of picture that, and that helps you think about no slope versus 0 slope. Because again, they're not the same. Okay? And for a lot of people, that maybe helps. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But let me give you one other way that I think is a little more practical, a little easier to remember, and it might help a lot of you. So when we talk about this line has no slope or an undefined slope. And so what we're going to do is we're going to draw another line like that, and then we're going to just make this say no slope. That way you see those two lines have no slope or an undefined slope. And then if you look at this one, horizontal line, it has a 0 slope. And so we're going to put another line there and make this one say 0 slope. And I know that's kind of corny and everything, but hopefully that will help you remember no slope versus the 0 slope. So that finishes up section 2.4. We're going to kind of build on this in 2.5, so I'm just going to move on into that. So in section 2.5, we're talking about the equation, writing equations. And so we have these 3 different forms of equations. One of these we have not talked about, this first one. The other 2 we have mentioned, so we'll just quickly kind of run through those. The first form of our equation is what we know as the point slope form. Now, it is called point slope not because somebody said, that'd be a great cool name for it, but it's called point slope because it uses a point and a slope. The name here tells us exactly what we're doing. We're using a point and a slope. And so in this form, the x sub 1 and y sub 1 together is an ordered pair. That is your point. And you can imagine that the m, again, is our slope. We've talked about how that lowercase m represents the slope. And so in this form, if we have a point and a slope, we can use this. Or if we even need to find a point and a slope, if it happens to be in this form, which typically it won't, then we could find that from this form. And so number 3 here is really important. This form is used to write equations. 98% of the time, when I ask you to write an equation, you're going to be using this form. You could use it every time, but for sure, about 98% of the time, you're going to use this form when I ask you to write an equation. And so we'll look at what that looks like here in just a second. Again, point and slope need to be used if we're going to write the equation. So let's look at how that works. We want to take an equation of the line through the point, 3, -5, and having a slope of -2. Now, sometimes our directions may say find an equation. That's the same thing as saying write an equation. So if you happen to see that a little bit different in your directions, it's not a big deal. So if we're going to write an equation, and we want to write the equation of the line that goes through this point, 3, -5, and has a slope of -2, we can use our point slope form, which again is y minus y sub 1 equals m times x minus x sub 1. And so in place of the x sub 1 and y sub 1, we're going to put our point, and then we're going to put the m, our slope, in place of the m. And so we just need to substitute our numbers in. So we have y minus our y value, which is -5. So be careful with your sign. And then our m is -2. And then we have x minus x sub 1, which is 3. And then we can clean that up a little bit by making that minus a negative be a positive. And so we have y plus 5 equals -2 times x minus 3. Now, you will never, ever, ever leave your equation in this form. You will do one of two things. Either you will take this equation and put it in standard form, which is ax plus by equals c. We've seen that form a little bit already. Or you'll take that equation and put it in slope-intercept form. Y equals mx plus b. And so I will typically tell you in the directions which one to go to. And I haven't done that here just because I wanted to have some flexibility with which way we go. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to take it to standard form. So in your notes, you may want to make a note of that we're going to change this to standard form. And so in standard form, we've got to get our x term and our y term on the same side and constants on the other. And so in this case, the first thing we need to do is we need to distribute this -2 so that we have y plus 5 equals -2x plus 6. And then we need to move the x term, so we'll add 2x to both sides. That way -2x plus 2x cancels, and we get 2x plus y. And in the same step, I'm going to subtract 5. That way I'm not having to write out multiple steps here. So the 5 minus 5 is 0. And then 6 minus 5 is 1. And now this equation is in standard form. Now remember, in standard form, the first number can't be negative. That a number, so in this case the 2, has to make sure it's a positive number, and it is. You also can't have fractions and it be in standard form. And so this one doesn't have any fractions, so this equation is the standard form of that equation that we wrote initially. Now, there may be questions that you have. We will talk about how to go to slope-intercept form in just a second, but If you have any questions about how to go to standard form, please let me know. If I need to break some of this stuff down in even more detail, I can always do that. Now, look at this one. This is the same type of question. It says write an equation of a line through the point -4, 1 and having a slope of -3. So again, if we're going to write an equation, we're going to do that with our point slope form. So we have y minus y sub 1 equals m times x minus x sub 1. And you don't have to rewrite that every time. I'm writing it just so you can see it on the screen. And so we're going to take our point and our slope and we're going to substitute that in. And so we have y minus 1 equals -3 times x minus -4. And again, that minus and negative can become positive. So, with this equation, we're going to take it and put it in slope-intercept form. And again, normally I will tell you in the directions. I'll say write your equation in slope-intercept form or write your equation in standard form. And on your math lab, as you're working through additional examples, you'll see that you'll be asked to do one or the other each time. And so in this case, we're going to go to slope-intercept form. And when I ask you to go to slope-intercept form, from this point, there are only 2 steps. The first step is to distribute. And the second step is to move, in this case, that -1 to the other side to get y by itself. Because we're trying to get the equation in this form. So we need to solve for y. So to do that, we'll distribute this -3. So we have y minus 1 equals -3x minus 12. And then we just need to solve for y. And so we're going to add 1 to each side. That way -1 plus 1 is 0. We get y. And we have -3x. And then -12 plus 1 is -11. Again, if you have any